placed a company with an open protocol, where would it really change lives? And if you've ever talked to an Uber driver, you know exactly what I mean. It would change lives if, you didn't have the situation like right now where sometimes a passenger pays $59 and the driver receives $16. That is a game changer, and I think we found a way to solve that.
Why are you the person, Paul, today that will solve kind of this coordination problem for these decentralized ride services? I think there's been kind of the meme that's been going on for a long time in blockchain is just like, oh, decentralized Uber. Why is that possible today, and why are you the person to ultimately solve that?
It's a good question.
Super excited to have you on today, Paul, the founder of Teleport. You and I think, are some of the Solana OGs now. We were talking a little bit before starting the podcast, and this upcoming Breakpoint is going to be our third, respectively, conference for Breakpoint. So very excited for this upcoming conference. You and I are both speakers there, which I think kind of, I guess, solidifies our standing as OGs as well. But welcome on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Logan. Pumped to be here.
Awesome. Well, I think before we're kind of diving into a little bit of your background, I would love for you to just expand on what Teleport is for those that are not familiar, and maybe just kicking off the podcast from there.
Awesome. Well, Teleport is a ride-sharing app, very much like any ride-share app that everyone listening to this is already using today. It's just as safe. It's just as reliable. You can pay with credit card. There are no extra steps. It's user-friendly. But it's different. Teleport is different in two important ways from the rideshare apps most people use today. One, it is built on a decentralized protocol that is the rideshare protocol, or TRIP. And that makes a big difference because it means that there's actual competition on the network between different operators. We'll get into that more. But for drivers and riders, this means the drivers earn more, the riders pay less, and there's just more competition and also much more open space for innovation on an open network. With open, I mean like email or the web. The second way in which it is different is taking a page out of Bitcoin's book here. I think it's very important to not just build something that's very decentralized. That's nice, but it doesn't mean that you have users. Bitcoin both achieved decentralization to a level that didn't exist before Satoshi found this very elegant solution to the Byzantine generals problem. But it also rewarded the early adopters. And I think if you do those two things, you're building something that is incredibly user-friendly, but also open to competition so that other people can innovate on top of it. And then two, you reward the early adopters. You really have all the ingredients for a potential revolution, or like a state change, a phase transition, if you will, because I think our ambition is for there to not be a rideshare protocol, but there to be the rideshare protocol building the global rideshare network. I think you will see a lot of this. There's one email protocol, there's one web protocol, and I think down the road this will apply to many more current monopolies.
I think that's a perfect setup, and definitely look forward to diving further into that coordination problem and also rewarding those early users. But maybe also kind of before we dive deeper into all of that, a little bit more background and color on yourself. Why are you the person, Paul, today, the person that will solve kind of this coordination problem for these decentralized ride services? I think there's been kind of the meme that's been going on for a long time in blockchain is just like, oh, decentralized Uber. Why is that possible today, and why are you the person to ultimately solve that?
It's a good question. I think if you had asked 8-year-old Paul if he thought that's what he's going to do when he's a little bit older, I don't think that was the ambition at all. I think it just kind of happened that during my life story, which is still ongoing, things happened that got me into a spot where, looking back, it all makes sense. I've always loved computers. I got into computer security, because of my brothers, and they made the first Linux floppy disk in 1994, where they put on a 1.4 megabyte floppy disk, they put something called DLX. It's a disk Linux. It's a compressed version of Linux that you could get free internet with. So I went to the university, technical university, and I kind of was hanging out there. And of course, I stood out a little bit. I look young anyway. So like over there being 12 years old, someone was like, you don't really belong here. But luckily they were friendly, and I made friends with the people running the computer lab at the Technical University in Vienna. And I got into computer security. In fact, I got into banking security by age 15 and, started working for a bunch of institutions there. I worked for the Bank of Austria, the Austrian Lottery Corporation, the Austrian Agrarian Ministry, Raiffeisen Bank, the Three Bank Group. Like I did all of that stuff, and like some of them before I was 20 years old. And later worked on quantum cryptography. So I kind of had like a wild. My brother's a physicist and actually worked with Anton Zeilinger, who recently got the Nobel Prize for quantum teleportation. And I worked on the information theory side of that, specifically something called privacy amplification. So this is kind of where I started off. But one thing happened to me, which was I didn't have very much of a community in Austria. I lived on the internet. I went to these hacker conferences. I was a speaker quite often. Sometimes was even on the program committee for, let's say, with 11,000 people, it's quite big. Americans don't know it as much. The Chaos Communication Congress in Berlin. And I always was there, and I was energized by the community of like all these people caring about the same stuff as me. And in fact, they even had started something called a hackerspace called Seabase in Berlin. And I wanted that at home, but I had no money, right? I could barely afford rent. So I was like, how do I bring a space like that back to Vienna where I lived? And I read a paper by Bruce Schneier, who's a cryptographer. I think he had a co-author on that paper about something called the Street Performer Protocol. And the Street Performer Protocol was a solution to how do you coordinate people so that many people together can fund a work of art without too much risk on any one individual. Specifically, it's called a threshold pledge these days, or there's a bunch of different names for it. But back then it was just the Street Performer Protocol or the Rational Street Performer Protocol. So I read this paper that was published in 1998, and I read it a little bit later, and I used it in 2006 to basically come up with an idea. I made a flyer, and I said, I want to build this community space. And if 100 people pay 20 euros a month, then we can afford this together. And everyone was like, you're not going to get 100 people. And I was like, well, there's no problem. Just put your name on the list. And, either you get what you want, because I know you want a community space like that too, or you don't have to pay anything. Well, it was so easy to get 100 people. It was really, really easy. It was very fast. And suddenly we had a community space, and I was like, I don't have any money, and I'm affording rent on this, for me back then, really expensive space, and I'm building a community with nothing but coordination tools. I think a light bulb went off that if you can coordinate people to do something together, if you can start movements, you can do really big things. In fact, that ended up, we started a website called hackerspaces.org. We talked about it at conferences. Other people started taking this idea and also basically evangelizing it, telling other people about it. I think over 1,300 hackerspaces are around. At some point, there were over 2,000 listed on hackerspaces.org. A lot of startups started there. The impact must have been, in the billions of dollars. I didn't get any of that, but, so much value created for so many people, including for me on the level of community. So that's how I first started thinking about coordination systems, that if you can make people do something together, that's very big. And then years later, zooming forward, I was an engineer at Dropbox, and I was working on protocols. I was designed the Dropbox LAN sync protocol. This was 2009, 2010, 2011. Like in that time period, I was working and designed a protocol that's now used probably on hundreds of millions of machines. I don't have the current numbers, but it's basically anytime a Dropbox talks to another Dropbox on the same local network, the same Ethernet or Wi-Fi, they talk using this protocol I designed. And thinking about protocols on one side and decentralization and, peer-to-peer protocols, on one side, and then on the other side, thinking about coordination, kind of something happened. I saw Bitcoin and I was like, this is big. This is both of the things that I find really fascinating in my work and in general in my life. They're suddenly merged into this one thing. And so I wrote a blog post in 2011 about the Byzantine generals problem. And I called it Bitcoin's value is decentralization. And it was a big deal because a lot of people credit me with making them aware that Bitcoin is actually different from previous things in the space because it solved such a hard problem that enabled this whole space of crypto that we're in now. And I got into rooms I never thought I would get into. I got introductions to just, incredible people in the tech space. And it was really fun. But I missed the forest for the trees. I have to say 10 years later. Because Bitcoin, yes, Bitcoin's value is decentralization. But if Satoshi hadn't solved the second problem, the coordination problem, I call it Satoshi's bridge, and I hope that term will catch on. If he hadn't solved the coordination problem of moving people from here to here, instead of everyone moving all at once, that is, a step function, he turned it into a gradient, where the first people to switch get a disproportionate reward because they take higher risk. And so realizing this a couple of years ago, and that's the story how we get to Teleport, a couple of years ago, I realized I missed the forest for the trees. It's not just about decentralization. It is also about adoption. But whenever you find something where you can combine essentially a few traits, where you have something that is credibly decentralized, because if you don't decentralize it and you have a good coordination system, let's say in the payments realm, you have PayPal, but that's still a single company controlling the fates of, they quite regularly, kick people off the platform or hold their funds, right? It's not real. It's not Bitcoin if it's run by a single company. On the flip side, if Bitcoin had only solved the decentralization without actually, having something like mining as a mechanism to bootstrap the network, well, no one would have heard about it. So that was my realization, I think mid 2021. And I was like, what are the things where the world really in a positive way changes for a lot of people if you replace a company because you previously could only do this in a centralized fashion. If you replace the company with an open protocol, where would it really change lives? And if you've ever talked to an Uber driver, you know exactly what I mean. It would change lives if, you didn't have the situation like right now where sometimes a passenger pays $59 and the driver receives $16. That is a game changer. And I think we found a way to solve that.
Well, Paul, to put it bluntly, it sounds like you've been preparing this moment for all your life. To start Teleport, you've been thinking about coordination systems, involved in the crypto ecosystem fairly early on, and it's kind of allowed you to identify how important coordination is, but not only that, being able to incentivize the early network participants. And I would love to just kind of continue to pull on that thread, and maybe you just start with coordination. I think you spoke to it very eloquently on really how these early blockchain systems like Bitcoin allowed coordination to really happen at scale. And I think Ethereum kind of expanded upon that with smart contracts, allowing you to build applications. And in my mind, we're kind of now on the third generation of blockchain architectures where you have smart contracts and scalability and self-sovereignty at scale with high throughput integrated blockchains. Can you kind of touch upon how you're thinking about coordination on these blockchains on kind of a higher level, and maybe even speak to a little bit of kind of the rise of these, what is now called decentralized physical infrastructure networks, and bootstrapping kind of the supply and demand side for these networks.
Absolutely. So I think the name of the game in the game of civilization is actually coordination, right? Like you get interesting phase transitions in society when a new technology changes what we can coordinate and how we can coordinate, right? Like the Mongol Empire was able to expand to a large degree because they had writing and accounting. right? Like accounting systems, like was what enabled that. Many of, history is complicated with all of those things, but building, coordinating a large amount of people to build giant monuments of the pyramid, the large pyramids and all of those things, they're not possible without coordination technology. I think the kind of coordination that I more specifically think about with something like Bitcoin and, in our digital age with spreading something is actually the combination of a kind of social movement with a reward system where the people who actually make that work benefit from making the movement succeed. So when I think about movements, and I think what you want is you want a system where the earliest adopters get rewarded by being a part of it. But the system is not important initially, right? So that there's not a lot of value. Bitcoin didn't have value when it launched. There was no implication that it would have value. It's just people got in, it was exciting. But the people on the inside who realized there's potential here, they wanted it to grow. So you want always the people on the inside to want it to grow. And in fact, you want them to want it to grow more the bigger it gets. And then you want people on the outside to want to join, and you want them to be able to join and benefit from joining the larger it gets. So if you're kind of like in the abstract thinking about any abstract thing, this was true of the hackerspaces movement, by the way. Like you want people they benefit if the system gets bigger. The people on the inside benefit if more cool people join, right? Because then you have exposure to all these amazing, interesting people that will come to your club. And so putting that together is very, very big. And it's nice if the benefit is societal, because I don't think most people want to do something that's only good for their own benefit, because it makes you kind of feel icky. But if you find that intersection where you're doing something that's obviously good for society, but it's also good for you personally to help society, oh my God, you can get like explosive growth.
And I think maybe to kind of relate it back to products that we know today, it's almost like when the early days of Uber or Lyft got off the ground, really rewarding those early drivers for their contributions to build out that network and really kick off the flywheel of that network effect. It is very hard to kind of do that, and ultimately that's probably why they did not. But now we have a new method of coordination via blockchain rails where this can now kind of be possible.
That is exactly right. Honestly, I think if you can get away with not rewarding a lot of the people who help you build something, I think it's going to be rare that someone actually, shares, with others. But I think what we found in some areas of the economy where a lot is about building coalitions with a lot of people to build something, we are seeing that, and that is an anomaly in history, right? Venture capital, and I know a lot of people in crypto don't like venture capital, but venture capital, as it's run in Silicon Valley, has a lot of like very positive sum properties, right? People pay it forward, entrepreneurs who've made it coach others, people form companies together after they leave a company. Their employee stock options. So there's a lot of this very positive sum. And I think, again, what will happen to society if there's more reward? But if you go back, you asked another question here. If you go back to like pre-2018 and before, I think partially the problem was also I don't think you could have built something like a decentralized marketplace. It was not cheap enough to make these transactions. The coordination and governance technology, and it's still evolving, but it just wasn't there yet to build such a thing. And also understanding on a lot of other technologies like CK snarks and, like all of these innovations that came out of the last 10 years, it's only getting ready now. And I think what people just don't quite see yet is we're not talking about putting rideshare on the blockchain purely for ideological reasons. I think it is better for drivers, riders, and the whole economy, and the innovation it unlocks that you can build on top of it is fantastic, but not purely for ideological reasons. I think a core argument is that it is just economically so much more efficient, and that is a narrative violation, by the way. Everyone thinks the centralized company is more efficient, and that has been true until now. I think in this case, you're dealing with an incumbent that has 33,000 employees, $9.5 billion in debt that they pay 7.2% interest on, meaning they pay like something like 600 million a year just on interest for their debt. And then, the driver receives $16 from a $59 ride. So the argument here is not switch because, we don't like Uber. I like Uber, by the way, actually. I use it a lot. I've used it a lot. I actually made simulations for Travis Kalanick back in 2009, before Uber was even Uber Cab. I've been following the space along. I think it's a fantastic innovation. I think the problem is just with monopolies. Like, even if a thing is fundamentally good, like providing transportation to people without discriminating and just allowing everyone to get where they need to go at a good price, that is great. But you take any good thing and you turn it into a monopoly, it is very easy to turn into a worse thing.
Yeah. One thing that kind of keeps coming up in my conversations with, I would say, this class of bear market builders has kind of been that shift towards, in the past, more ideology to what now I'm saying like ruthless pragmatism, and just saying the application actually needs to be better than the Web 2 counterpart. It can't just be like ideology. It's decentralized and therefore everybody will come and use it. The product that you're building has to be better. And I think that's amazing to hear you kind of re-articulate that. One thing that I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper in is kind of what you mentioned on a high level, and kind of going back to my earlier point, blockchain, or Uber for blockchain, or blockchain, the application of a Uber built on a blockchain has kind of always been a 2 years away type application. And you mentioned in 2017, 2018, it was not yet possible. Could you kind of talk about some of the limitations that you saw in these earlier systems, and today why you specifically think it's possible, whether it's the high throughput blockchains, whether it's more block space, it's the zero knowledge proofs. What now makes it possible where you feel confident that this can actually scale and bring value to ultimately tens of millions and hundreds of millions of people in the future?
Great question. I think if I had to pick the absolute hardest part, it is understanding. Like, I don't think anyone had that understanding. Like, there's a history of several failed attempts, and I have my own history of many, many failed attempts. The problem is, in the idea maze, it's very easy to have the wrong idea. You take an abstract concept like rideshare on the blockchain. That is a hollow concept, right? Until you fill it with like the specifics of how and why is it cheaper? Why is it better? What are all the different, challenges? What are the challenges in which are the centralization points? I think the 2 years away thing will never become real until someone with soul in the game, not just skin in the game, but soul in the game, actually puts the hard work in and grinds for a couple of years. So the first version of what I tried to do here was actually like a layer 2 roll up. It was meant to be peer-to-peer. I didn't understand the regulatory aspects yet, and the reasons for the regulatory aspects. There's a lot of research, a lot of experimentation. I would say we made almost, probably not every possible failure, but sometimes it feels like that. I had to knock my head against so many different walls to find a good solution. I think what you're going to see, and I want to have this on the record because I think you're going to literally see that. When people see the elegant solution that we came up with after I'm 2.5 years into this, basically full time, people are going to be like, this is so obvious. The design, the architecture is so clean and clear. They didn't do anything. It is so easy to do this. I think so. Like the first takeaway here is just saying you do something doesn't mean you do the thing. You actually need to try all the things that don't work to find something that works. And what you're probably left with just looks so clean that it's obvious. So that was the first part. I think a big insight here, by the way, was what I call adapter companies. Just kind of realizing that's more of a mental philosophical shift. realizing that even Bitcoin miners are legal entities, right? They're sole proprietors, or they're limited liability corporations, but in some eye, they pay for electricity, you know, they have they're regulated by whatever local laws wherever they operate. They might even be regulated by interstate laws and things like that, right? So they're normal companies, but Bitcoin is still decentralized, massively decentralized. It's decentralized across countries. No one's doubting that. And so the realization is you can build a very decentralized system that is built out of centralized components, miners or validators. Similarly, you can build a decentralized rideshare network where there's many local rideshare operators that are fully regulated, that comply with local regulation, that engage with the local regulators, that are licensed, that have drivers that are background checked. And still the network as a whole is decentralized because there's not just one rideshare company like on the current operators, but there's many different ones. There's many different email providers. There's many different websites. There's not just one. That was a key insight. We don't want to get rid of the rideshare operators. We think they serve a very important function in making sure these rides are safe and secure and working with the local municipalities on achieving that goal. That's a big philosophical shift for someone in, like the early days of crypto, to go from everything is completely in the cloud, the government can't touch it, to sitting down with regulators and talking with them and hearing back, this is incredible. This would help, this would help our constituents leave more money in the local economy instead of funneling it upstream. It would give us more room to work with these competitors to actually, get concessions from the companies. If we deal with a single monopolist, it's very hard. They're saying, we're leaving your market but if you deal with many small ones, then you can it's better for the regulator. And then on the flip side, it's still better for the customer, right? The negotiation here is happening at the right level. So I think that was a big insight. I think on the tech side, speed and transaction cost, you can't do this with 10 transactions a second. You can't do it with 30 transactions a second. Then there's other things. You don't want your location data to be on chain. So you actually needed to just find a way, you want to have privacy. I think over time we're going to see, and I think this is starting with things like Light Protocol and Solana and other CK Snark technology. You want to bring things we take for granted in the offline world or in the pre-crypto world, like confidential payments, right? So confidential transactions, which is really important to consumers because, you don't want to announce to the world how much money you have in your wallet all the time with every transaction. And I think this is actually where I hope and expect, the regulators to change, to actually start to become concerned the other way around. I think there's a middle ground, right? Because you want to engage on the level of making sure that money is serving only benign and good purposes, but then on the flip side, you also got to protect the consumer from, surveillance by bad actors. So we're going to have to negotiate that middle ground as a society. And also like other things, down the road, governance, there's a lot of innovation that had to happen. Bitcoin has a very particular, very opinionated way of handling governance. And I don't think even like back in 2018, I don't think we're actually done with innovating in governance, but I think there's going to be many years of that. But I think only now we're reaching a point where any of this is starting to be possible, and it's going to keep evolving at really rapid pace.
Yeah. And to that point, I mean, one thing that I consistently say on the podcast is just how early crypto truly is. And I was a product nerd and really loved digging into the analytics. And it wasn't until I started playing around with Dune that I saw how few people were actually doing things on chain. Even the most popular applications that probably everybody in the crypto community knows has only a couple 100,000 daily active addresses, and oftentimes, I mean, less than a couple million lifetime active addresses. So we're still very, very small, and it's great to hear kind of your articulation of how now it's possible and before it wasn't. Maybe shifting slightly, I think for the people that are not in the weeds as much as you are, in kind of the day-to-day operations of how these kind of traditional Web 2 ride shares work behind the scenes, how the payment economics is split up. Can you maybe walk us through how that typically happens and how Teleport will ultimately reward the drivers kind of in higher pay, and ultimately that brings down user rides as well?
Yes. So, a lot of the information of how exactly these large rideshare operators are run is, not exactly, they have public filings, SEC filings and things like that. And you can talk with people to kind of get a little bit more color from behind the scenes. But they're guarding this actually quite closely, right? They're mixing things together in such a way to not make it so clear. They don't want to tell the drivers too clearly how much they're actually, how much the rider paid. There's been some attempts to adding some transparency, but it's simply not in their interest. And the reason for that is they call themselves a marketplace, but de facto a marketplace requires, a market to settle price at an equilibrium between supply and demand. The interest for a large monopolist, or, can call it oligopoly if there's like two enormously large, like vast majority companies in the US, is to charge the customer as much as possible and then pay the driver as little as possible, right? There's a constraint here, which is if you pay the driver too little or the customer too much, you might lose some customers or you might lose some drivers. To some degree, to some certain point, that still benefits the company, right? You want to keep the high paying customers and you want to, but you don't want to lose too many drivers, but you'd rather lose a few drivers and, pay the others less. There's an equilibrium point there, but it's not the equilibrium that we usually expect from a market. Now, that is the obvious choice. Even if you introduce a second competitor, a second largest competitor, and combined, they're just, the behemoth. They are rideshare in the United States. I know they're smaller operators, but they're barely a blip. Of course, there is, even if it's implicit, there's coordination, right? You're going to try to make your prices be close to that. So the problem with that is, you might have voice. You can complain in a driver forum if you're a driver. You have exit. You can leave, but you can't really leave to like another provider. So that is the fundamental conundrum of getting a monopoly in this space. Now, what adds to that is, I think, the high inefficiency of these providers, right? So we can argue, do you need 33,000 employees to connect a driver and a rider while providing insurance services and helping people who occasionally lost their AirPods or phone in a car? I know there's a little bit more, but at the foundation, if you call a taxi by phone, that's kind of what they do. The operational efficiency of taxis with phone operators that they're actually paying a salary at this point, from my understanding, might actually be higher than that of Uber. That's insane, right? Computers are supposed to make this cheaper. Of course, there's no incentive to cut the fat because there's no competition. So that's the fundamental setup here. Now, to go a little bit deeper here is, after all of these expenses, interest on debt, employees, giant buildings they have in real estate in, all of that, they still spend 40% on the order of their revenue on driver and rider acquisition, meaning they're bleeding drivers somewhere between 10 to 12% month over month, and then they give incentives to acquire new ones because it's cheaper for them to just pay everyone less and bleed more drivers and then acquire new ones with that money than to just simply pay people more. It is a very weird business model. It does work, but it only works if there's no competition.
I guess long term, where do you feel like this ends up? Obviously, you're working on a protocol that would allow kind of that Nash equilibrium to occur in an open market. Do you feel like that is the end state? Do you feel like, kind of being a little bit more technology focused myself, And my time past at Tesla, kind of this combined with like autonomous vehicles, where do you feel like things are going to end up in their like final state?
It's a great question, and I think the answer you find actually in capital efficiency. So one of if you're an investor in a bunch of different businesses, you see something happening. Sometimes someone has happened to one of my portfolio companies recently. They were acquiring real estate directly and building their business on real estate they outright owned. And then as they kind of were expanding their business, they uncovered a way to grow much faster, which was to use other people's real estate and just become an operator for that real estate. And they started selling off their existing basis of real estate because, they don't have unlimited capital. So now if you think Tesla, and Tesla, by the way, is also starting to sell their full self-driving technology, to other outlets, like as a, with a deal. I don't think Tesla is gonna be able to raise the endless capital it will take to build and outright own all of the self-driving cars needed to move the world to fully self-driving. Instead, what will happen is local fleet operators, just like right now, are going to buy these cars, and some of them are going to specialize in Tesla, and others might specialize on BMWs, and maybe they're running on Cruise that they're licensing from General Motors, or maybe it runs on something else. But where I'm getting at is you will see many, many, many fleet operators, and probably also a very long period where it's mixed between human operated cars and self-driving cars, because the self-driving cars won't work in every single specification. So now where do you find a neutral ground between all of these different providers and operators? Well, again, that should be a protocol. Just like there's an email protocol that both Microsoft and Google, and they kind of were mortal enemies for a little while, right? And Apple and, and Facebook or Meta now, right? They can all work with email. There's a protocol for the web. And, different companies that compete with each other can actually interoperate in a web browser. You can use Microsoft Edge's browser. You can use Google's Chrome browser. You can use Brave, which is, big supporter of Solana as well. You can use all of these different technologies and they work together. And I think that is the future I see. On the other hand, there's not a second email protocol. There's not a second web protocol, or at least none that are actually seeing usage, right? There's the web, there's email, there's going to be rideshare, there's going to be food delivery. I think it is a winner takes all market, but not by a single company, but by a single protocol.
And maybe diving deeper into that specific topic, I think just as kind of these high throughput blockchains are coming into age today, so is this new category that is kind of emerging, being dubbed decentralized physical infrastructure networks, where ultimately they have a supply side and a demand side, and they're incentivizing the supply side via some of these token economics, similar to kind of providing some form of value if you could do that in an equity fashion to Web 2. Can you kind of talk about this emerging category and specifically about Teleport and how you're trying to award these early drivers to build or contribute their hours or driving abilities to Teleport instead of these other Uber or Lyft networks?
Absolutely. So I think the key here is I think there are two different parts or two different flows of value on a network like this. For one, I want to say people on this network will pay with credit cards, and in the US, they will pay with dollars. In Europe, they will pay with euros. There's the side on the customer side where you can either pay with your Solana wallet that contains USDC or a different stablecoin, as we're adding support for more, but initially it's going to be Circle's USDC. On the driver side, you're receiving the stablecoin. So the important thing to the driver is, how much do I get paid in dollars? That's not negotiable, right? They got families to feed, they got rent to pay. That's got to be dollars, and we got to be we got to be competitive on the dollar amount. Now, luckily for us, the competitors have a scale advantage, but they're incredibly inefficient, as I already said, right? So, like Jeff Bezos had the saying, "Your margin is my opportunity." Couldn't be truer here. If a centralized entity was actually fair on their own, it's very hard to compete with a competitor that is not wasteful. Like it's always hard to compete with a competitor that is entrenched and not wasteful. The waste here is really the opportunity. So that's dollar payments. The other portion of it is something that I find very interesting, which is we think that Satoshi invented not just, the decentralization portion of this, he also invented a bridge to reward the early adopters, beyond sending, money from one person to another or paying for goods and services, but in the system, rewarding the early adopters for using the system. The way we adopt Satoshi's bridge, and I call it Satoshi's bridge because everyone talks about network effects being a moat, right? It's a barrier to entry. It is a moat around like your castle in the middle, and no invaders can get in, or more likely in the apt analogy, the drivers can't escape your little prison on the island because there's no bridge to get out and there's a moat around it. But if we built a bridge, people could actually leave to a new, better system that is more optimal for them. And that means receiving more dollars in payments. How do we coordinate that action? Well, on Bitcoin, every 10 minutes, the people doing work on the network, roughly proportional to how much work they are doing on the network, get a reward. It's a bit more complicated, mining pools, I know, but in the end, it's roughly proportional to how much work you put in, what you get from this reward pool. We're doing something very similar. On the rideshare protocol, what we're going to do is every week, depending on how much of the revenue is associated with work done by you, you get a slice of a token pool that gets issued to people. So the reason this is it's not for inviting people alone, because that can be faked. There's Sybil attacks, right? You could just invite random people. It is going to be based on the revenue on the network. That means if you run an operator in a market that is very busy, you have the licenses, you have the insurance, you went through the complicated multi-month process to start an operator, and that is really just dealing with the government. That is real work. And then you're handling the customer support, and you're fighting for the reputation of your operator. You get a reward for that. If you verify and background check people, and again, that is not that easy of a process. There's various ways. You've seen this already. People are doing background checks, or you verify the motor vehicle record of someone. You can earn a portion for the revenue you bring. Those are the smaller parts. The biggest jobs on the network are driving and riding. And then beyond driving and riding, actually, the people who bring that supply and demand of drivers and riders. Because in any kind of network effect business, there's a minimum amount of drivers and riders, or the hard side and the easy side of the market, as Andrew Cheng calls it in the Gold Start problem, that you need for things to take off. And if you're above that limit of the minimum amount of people in a local village, town, city, your network becomes viable. So what we do is we have a function, we call it balancing. The balancers are kind of like Bitcoin miners, but except what they do is they balance supply and demand by going to the markets where it is most beneficial to add more drivers and riders. They invite people, and then they get a portion of the rewards allocated to the revenue in that market. They get a portion of that every week.
So maybe just to rearticulate, ultimately, people need to eat, and you can't really pay people in tokens 100%. It has to be done through dollars. And props to you and the team to ultimately facilitate paying through credit card or even USDC. Those fiat on and off ramps, I think historically we've seen time and time again that just kind of natively onboarding into this crypto ecosystem. Once you're in there, it's kind of blue waters, but setting up that wallet and making an account, putting either USDC in it is still kind of a large task. And so for those non-crypto native users, that is extremely important. And then over time, as these kind of revenues continue to grow in certain jurisdictions or local markets, the proportional work done is contributed kind of proportionally to the amount that you've done in that local municipality. And you earn rewards on top of just that cash component.
Correct. And, these rewards, I think it's really up to people to decide, if they find these rewards useful or not, right? So the interesting factor here is if you think that a network that these are estimates we found by analysts, the global rideshare market by 2030 is going to process about 300 billion to a trillion a year in just transaction volume, right? So if you think owning, like a token issued by this network is valuable to you, that is up to you. It's very similar to actually how Bitcoin came to be, right? Bitcoin initially just created Bitcoin and didn't say it has value. I think it's possible for something to become valuable when people like it. We have a very similar stance. People shouldn't be buying or selling these tokens. People should be earning them by doing work on the network. And in a way, it actually allocates resources towards the markets where it's most viable to add revenue to the network. So our ambition purely is pay people more than the incumbent rideshare operators, just purely in dollars, and then make sure that people get, the trip rewards on the network in proportion to how much they help others move over. And if that works, right, we could see a mass exodus of people, one, away from these platforms, but two, and I don't want to discount this is actually key, each of these applications actually has a full Solana wallet built on, right? That might be tens or hundreds of millions that are actually suddenly having USDC stablecoins sitting in their wallet. So if Solana Pay gets even the slightest bit of adoption at, like places like Sweetgreen or, others, you could suddenly pay with the USDC you just got. If a food delivery protocol comes along at a later point, the driver can go straight back and pay for pickup at a restaurant with the money he just earned from driving. So there's really an opportunity for mass adoption here. And it all is possible by one, cheap, fast transactions that enable this, and like a very smart, I would say, protocol for working with regulators and with all the different parties and making rideshare happen. And then on the other side, acknowledging that the people building the network early on, when there's little revenue, you get a larger share of these rewards. Everyone is going to make their own decision on this, but to me, it's quite obvious that if I get paid more and on top of that, I get a reward that I can choose to want to have or not, that is a win-win for everyone involved.
Totally agree there. I think, as you mentioned, it's that cold start problem is the thing that is you're going to have to overcome, and not just you, really all blockchain founders today. I think trying to get distribution, making sure that your product actually delivers value, and going back to kind of being ruthlessly pragmatic about, does my product actually deliver a better experience than my Web 2 counterpart? How, outside of, I would say, just the purely economic point of view with additional tokens being paid kind of like instantly, what is the go-to-market strategy? Like, I know the Teleport is not live yet, but will be hopefully soon.
It's better than that. There is a app in the App Store right now. Like, we haven't actually told anyone yet, but it's in the App Store right now. It is invite gated, so the only way you can actually get in if someone invited you that is already in the app. And so it's literally the only way to get in. And we are, as we're gearing up for Breakpoint, are going to like slowly, like we're not quite there, but I think I will send you a follow-up with a code that you can also send to your audience. what's going to happen is people can download it. They can take virtual rides. They can learn a little bit about how the system works. They're going to get we're not quite issuing it, but we're going to issue it down the road for these early adopters who are coming in now, like a commemorative CNFT for early adoption. And it explains a little bit the mechanisms of how this is all going to work. The virtual ride is literally the same software that we're using. We've already done rides in Lisbon and for Breakpoint last year and for Art Basel in Miami. But now we're actually getting ready to go live for real. The important thing for that process was an internal decision that we are not, we want this to be and become a fully decentralized protocol. And our path to get there is first showing how it's done. So we've actually created subsidiaries that applied for rideshare companies in several states in the US. So that gives us the basis that in a few places in the US, we can actually start rolling this out. And we're talking about very populous states in the US that we're already allowed to operate in, and more are coming. The next stage then is telling people either you're in a place where we don't have any rideshare companies yet. And by the way, if you're in a place where we already have a rideshare company, you can start a second or third or fourth. We want competition. We don't want to operate rideshare. We want to build decentralized protocols. The second portion that's going to happen is we're going to show people, hey, you are, let's say, in Dallas, Texas. Yes, we have a rideshare operator in Texas, but not yet. Right now, we only have enough drivers and riders in Austin. We need 60 more drivers and 500 more riders signed up in this market before the market goes live. And so what you're going to find is we're going to, around the world, because the moment the weekly competition, as we called it, is turned on, a lot of people are going to find themselves in cities where there's no rideshare operator and there's not enough riders and drivers, which means they can't participate on the network. They're going to be upset. And I understand they're going to be upset. And the solution is easy. We're going to put infrastructure in place where you can talk with us and we can advise you. We're not doing it for you, but we can advise you on how to reach out to your local regulator, get a license to operate, get the insurance you need, and we might be able to make introductions there. Again, we're not doing it, but we've done it ourselves, so we know how it works, at least for the US for now. And so you get a rideshare operator live in your local market. Next step is you team up with other people in your city and you recruit enough drivers and riders that we reach that atomic network level. The network turns on and now you can actually participate. For one, you're instantly going to pay like on the order of like 90% going to the drivers. So like you really have a strong incentive on the cash side to move, over just there, because we are so much more operationally efficient than, like this large, we have on the order of like 18 employees right now, right? We're tiny. They have 33,000. So we're so much more efficient. We just write software. Other people operate these rideshare operators, and it is not as, you don't need 32,000 people for running that piece of software. And there's ways to help with software as a service and so on. So that's the next step. The third step is once you have enough drivers and riders, your city is live. And so what we want to see is a global rollout. And yes, we can help. We can organize meetups. We can help. But we want to play within completely. We're not different from any other operator on this network. We have subsidiaries, the operators. We want other people to be able to build software clients for the network. We have our own teleport. We want to turn it into Teleportium, which is like Chrome and Chromium. Chrome is Google's browser. Chromium is the open source version. We want to make an open source version of our client. We're making open source versions of our server. So we want to build an ecosystem for rideshare. And ideally, we don't want to run rideshare at all.
I think that's very exciting. I mean, congratulations on having the application in the App Store. That's no small feat itself. But the fact that it's already an open beta is amazing. Are there any target cities that I guess you would love to see come out and provide rides first? Are rides going to be available at Breakpoint as well?
We did rides at Breakpoint last year. Right now, I think what's changed for us is we actually deeply know how to build this. Like just through and through. Our roadmap is very, very clear. I think the thing that shifts around quite a bit is the order of operations, because we are, as I said, we're a very small organization, like maybe big for crypto, but for the ambition of what we're doing, we had to build our own identity system. We had to understand the whole regulatory landscape. We actually had a lot more on the side of rideshare for this economic model than we had on the crypto side. But also we have like several data scientists running economic and agent-based models on just like all of these parameters we're dealing with. I think the core for us is we want to play within the rules of this game. What that means for us is we're going to apply for licenses as many places as we can. We want to add support for stablecoins other than USDC, including Euro, but that's just more work on the client side. We don't have the resources for that immediately. We want to make that happen. But yeah, the moment the tech supports it and the moment there's a local rideshare operator and enough drivers and riders, we can turn it on anywhere. And we will support, by doing meetups, by going to conference, by hopping on podcasts, like anything we can do we're going to sit down with drivers. Like if someone wants to do this locally and invites us, we'll try our very best to show up and, be part of a Q&A with drivers. We want people to understand this deeply. That's how we can support. But we don't want to run the rideshare companies. We want other people to run the rideshare companies.
And maybe on that, what would your direct message be to someone that's interested or listening to this podcast and it was like, this is fascinating. I can make more money. I actually do drive and I want to contribute to Teleport and what they're building there.
I think the two major ways you can help and get in touch is one, I would say within a week-ish, definitely by the start of Breakpoint, we are going to have rolled out these invites for people to actually, download the app. We're iOS only right now. And I know there's a lot of people who like Android. I like Android too, but we had to start somewhere. You'll be able to download it and you'll be able to find someone. Will hopefully spread virally. So find someone who has an invite, get their invite code and just join. I'm not going to, push my own code here. That would not be fair. But we're going to start handing them out. Once you're on, invite people. We're going to see demand indication is the term in the industry for this. Where people are, initially a lot of people are going to be in Amsterdam, but over time they're going to move somewhere else. We're going to add leaderboard support, this kind of stretch goal for us. We might have it in before Breakpoint. So we're going to start really giving people dashboards that you use from Solana validators. We're going to give you the same kind of dashboards where you're seeing where the demand is. And then with that demand and, supply and demand, really drivers, riders coming online, we're going to try to support that organic going online, whether that's in a market where we, or a subsidiary of ours, has a rideshare company, or it's a market where we don't have a rideshare company, but someone else started one. So the two ways are download the app and find a code. And two, if you think you can start a rideshare company in your market, get in touch with us. We'll help you start a rideshare company.
Amazing. I'll definitely show my code if I get one. But maybe
we'll get you one.
Perfect. Well, maybe kind of rapid fire as we're kind of approaching the end of the podcast. What does the future look like in 5 years with kind of ride sharing services, or even 10 years out? Where do you see that landscape?
I think 7 years from now, it is realistic for us to run 50% of global rideshare. I think that sounds ambitious. Let's double the size of Uber in percentage, not in absolute, because the market is growing something like 16.6% a year. The total rideshare market is just growing explosively. So it will keep growing for the people who want transportation, right? So I think that's ambitious, but then on the flip side, you think about it, this just follows the pattern, right? Like Uber barely was started in 2009, 2010. Netflix only started 12 years after Blockbuster, right? So like we went from VHS tapes to Netflix being started. Blockbuster started 12 years before Netflix. That's insane to me. But so that's kind of the speed of this kind of innovation. So I think 7 to 10 years from now, I would expect there to be that rideshare network and it's done. That's what it is. And I think the moment people realize, and I said this before, how simple all of this really is, because it is so simple at heart that once you know how it works, you get it. People will start copying this and they will go after different spaces and will be really interested in seeing which network effects are weak, which network effects are strong, and what kind of techniques people can deploy on breaking network effects. And I think in the end, what we're going to find out is if you are too extractive and you run a monopoly, meaning if you're doing a good job and you're not too extractive, you will be able to hold on to it. But there's basically this threshold where if you're too extractive and you don't have you start to get competition, people will switch over. We're going to see this across the board. If you do a good job, I do think companies can run things for a long time. But the moment they try to F people over, that's going to be the new world. There's going to be a protocol replacing you.
And it goes back to your margin is my opportunity.
It's the same thing. It's not actually that different. The only difference is if you realize how important the drivers are to rideshare, or important the restaurants and delivery drivers are in food delivery and so on, then you're realizing that a deal that is bad for them is not sustainable unless there is no competition. So I definitely do expect, pushback on this, by the way. But the only entities that would push back against this are going to be the incumbents who benefit from there not being any competition, because they can't survive if there is competition.
I love it. All right. Final question, Paul. Obviously, you evaluated many different technical solutions in your quest to build Teleport. Maybe 1 minute, why Solana?
The initial solution that I wanted to work on, I think I said this earlier, was like a layer 2 roll up, and it just got very complicated. So I kind of went back to the drawing board and I was like, what do I actually need to accomplish my goal of creating a better rideshare experience with no extra steps? The users do no extra steps. If they want to pay credit card, they pay credit card. No sacrifices on safety, no sacrifices on anything. It has to be better, not worse. And what is the simplest solution to deliver on that promise? And Solana has very high amount of USDC volume, right? It is extremely cheap and fast. I don't think anyone can really compete. It is very easy to compose. So if you build things like our identity protocol, other projects will be able to use it. There's so much innovation. There's fantastic support now for CK snarks and other tools. So we really get to build on something that just offers what we need. And you can find parts of this or parts of that on other chains. I haven't found something that actually has the combined package. I think the one thing is, if you're building on Solana, you really, really want to build something. You're not going there because it has the largest community, or the community is fantastic, by the way, but you can always find one argument that is better somewhere else. But if you just need multiple things, all of them, to build what you want to build, you don't really have that much choice. As Solana sometimes says now, only possible on Solana is, you might be able to make it work elsewhere, but it's going to take extra work.
Amazing. Ruthless pragmatism. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Paul, the co-founder of Teleport.
Thank you so much, Logan. Good to see you.
Thank you.